All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's training class for SAF-HOLLAND. What we're going to cover today is the maintenance and operation of the Holland FW35 fifth wheel. So some quick introductions. My name is Tony Ryan. I'm the Technical Services Manager here at SAF-HOLLAND. In short, that means I look after the field service group. So if you've got problems in the field with your fleet, you'll call one of our guys and we'll work through your issues or questions. In some cases, we'll come out and help or do training, anything of that sort as well. So to my right, your left is Dan Cohn. Your new title is Business Development Manager.
Senior Business Development.
There we go. So he's your man if you've got a sales question. So we'll skip through straight to the important parts. Let's get straight into the presentation here. This is the agenda. There will be a PDF copy of this hopefully attached to the website when we upload this as well. So you'll be able to get to this as well. There is some very cool live links in this. That's the agenda, but let's get straight into the presentation. So a vehicle comes in with a Holland fifth wheel. Here's the information that you need to know. The ID tag itself is on the left-hand side of the ramp, as you can see there in figure 1. It's a stick-on code, stick-on tag with a QR code on there. You'll see the QR codes on the two graphics on the right-hand side. Those QR codes that are attached to it take you to a website called POD Plus. POD stands for Parts on Demand. You'll be able to scan that. It will take you to a site which will give you information on that fifth wheel. It doesn't take you to the generic site. It takes you to the site for that exact model fifth wheel you're working on. And from there, you'll be able to get to literature, manuals, all sorts of things, parts lists, everything that you need will be on that POD Plus website. The other thing that you can take away from this slide here is that there's two ID tags there you can see. The top one is marked OEM complete tops. So if you were to order that model number that starts with an FW, that picture on the right hand side, including a slide base, feet, everything, that is what you'll get. The one on the bottom you'll notice has model number starting with XA. Okay, that is an aftermarket top plate only. And as you can see on the picture on the right hand side, that's what you'll get when you order it. So if you've got a vehicle that came as new out of the factory, it will have an FW level part number. If you do have an issue and you ever need to replace it, call up the customer service through your dealer, whatever they need to do, just let them know this is the parent part number, but I just need the top plate. And then you'll get an XA level part number from there. A much cheaper way to replace the top plate rather than replacing the whole thing. So POD Plus, here is what it looks like. On the left-hand side there is the cell phone version, and on the right-hand side is the website version. And you can see there's all sorts of literature available on there, whether it's product details, cross-references, service and warranty information, installation instructions, everything is on there that you're able to get. Handy as for people who work night shift and wear clothes, so you can still get information at your fingertips very easily. So the overview of the FW35 fifth wheel, patented twin lock design. There's nothing like it in the industry. The others are swinging jaw types. The visible lock indicator, what does that mean? That's the adjustment nut that hangs on the front of the fifth wheel, but the drivers are able to use that as a visible lock indicator. So drivers love it because they can see whether the fifth wheel locked correctly or not just by that. Safest, most robust fifth wheel lock design in the industry. It's been around for a very, very long time. While we have evolved this fifth wheel, the same basic design has been around for a long time. That's how bulletproof it is. Forward hardened machine steel locks. It completely captures the Kingpin all the way around 360 degrees with twin jaw design. So that means that the wear is on the jaws, which is a nice thing when you have to rebuild it. And it's the model used for all future technologies. So if you're using a yard spotter fifth wheel, It's an FW35 TT, the terminal tractor. It's the big brother to this one, but the same basic components, same basic design. So that shows you how robust that model fifth wheel is. So fifth wheel identification, we have a few different versions. As I mentioned, this is the FW35 we're going to cover today. We do have one in the room. We'll walk around shortly. The yard spotter version is the FW35 TT, which I just mentioned. And we also have a low loop plate version, which is the FW33. Same basic mechanism across all of them. The only differences is the TT is the bigger brother, slightly beefed up components in it, and the 33 is the low loop version. But 35 is the standard over the road version that has a very good market share for us. This video here shows you the operation. We've grayed out the fifth wheel top plate itself. It just shows the mechanism, all the moving parts inside it. So you'll see there's a handle off to the left-hand side there. The yoke shaft with the adjustment nut comes up the top. The U-shaped piece that's attached to is called the yoke. Inside that is the jaws. The other components you'll see in there in the background is the cam plate, the triangular piece. And there's a little finger that sits on the left of the yoke shaft itself. That's the secondary lock. So as you pull the handle, it rotates the camshaft. The secondary lock gets pushed out of the way by the cam plate, not the camshaft. Gets pushed out of the way, and that allows the yoke to come up and open the drawers so it can come out. The other thing we'll show you in this video is when a Kingpin goes back in and how it locks. It will show you when we walk around as well later on what happens when you change the status of this fifth wheel. So it goes from locked to unlocked to the ready to couple position. So there is a third position. So we'll play this video and you can see how this operates. So pull the handle, camshaft rotates, pushes the secondary lock out, yoke comes up, and the jaws are opened, allowing the Kingpin to come out, and then everything snaps shut. So we'll go through it in slow motion, see the yoke coming up. Kingpin comes out, opens the jaws, and you saw the cam plate and the handle bobble as the Kingpin comes out. That puts it back into the ready to couple position. And then bang, everything closes up. So there's no external inputs needed to lock the fifth wheel. You don't have to hit any buttons or anything like that. It's literally the Kingpin coming into the jaws is what makes it operate. Okay. So this is the owner's manual. There's a live link on the bottom of the presentation there. Well, I'm not going to go through line by line on this, but this is what this presentation is based off. So all the information is in that. This is readily available to download off our website, which is www.saf-holland.us. If you hit .com by accident, you'll go to the global website and just have to hit US and English and go from there. Takes you to the same place. So maintenance and inspection. We have two schedules for the maintenance and inspection. The first one is 3 months, 30,000 miles. Lubricate the lock mechanism, check the functionality, make sure everything's working as it should. That goes for both over the road application, fifth wheels, and also the air release if you've got that as an optional extra on your fifth wheel as well. So just make sure with the air release, clean the shaft, lubricate the cylinder, which is a very simple task of pulling the airline out of the fitting. They're pushed to connect fittings. So pop that airline out, put a couple of drops of tool oil lubricant into the fitting, and then put the airline back in. If you feel that way inclined, you can cycle it a few times, but it will generally do it itself as you apply and release it anyway. The other maintenance schedule is 6 months, 60,000 miles. So this is a little bit more in depth. We expect you to inspect the fifth wheel for bent, broken, missing components. Make sure it's lubricated, it's cleaned from top to bottom, just to make sure that everything is okay. Last thing you want to do is if you don't clean it and there's an issue with it, you didn't see it because it was covered in grease. So please clean it down, inspect bent, broken, missing components out of it. You'll notice here it also says the lubrication components, and there's a little bit more on the next graphic as well. But the grease is most of the components there are pointed out from the right hand side arrows. points to the yoke shaft, the cam plate, etc. The secondary lock pin, the jaws, the yoke tips all need grease, and it's a water-resistant lithium-based grease. And I'll get in more in depth in that in just a minute. The odd one for lubrication is the cam plate pivot point. So you see on the left-hand side there of the cam plate, it shows it's an oil lubricant needed, not the lithium-based grease. This next graphic shows it a little bit easier. So all the red components on that left graphic there, water-resistant lithium-based grease. Now, the reason we mention it must be lithium-based grease. We don't want petroleum-based grease. Most of the components, it doesn't really matter, but item C is the one point where it doesn't matter. There is a rubber grommet that hangs off that yoke shaft that sits underneath the adjustment nut, and rubber and petroleum don't like to mix with each other, and it won't be long until that rubber grommet ends up floating down the road somewhere and not doing what it's supposed to. So we recommend you use lithium-based grease and not petroleum-based grease. Item G, as we mentioned, that cam plate pivot point needs a oil-based lubricant put to it. And then on the right-hand side, the air cylinder, you'll put the drops of tool oil in the fitting, but then just clean the shaft down. Just use a black rag. Don't use anything abrasive. Don't use steel wool or emery paper, because that shaft runs on the seal. And the last thing you want to do is score that, and then you start leaking air out of the air cylinder. Doesn't do its job. So just clean that down, make sure there's no crud built up on it, and it's able to slide freely. Seasonal preventative maintenance. This is a big one for the northern states. We're based here in Michigan. We see a lot of the sodium chloride and all sorts of stuff on the roads that they use. That gets built up on things. So we recommend a 6-monthly seasonal preventative maintenance schedule. In spring and fall is perfect. So in fall, you're able to get everything all running in tip-top shape to get through a harsh northern winter. And then in spring, you're able to go and clean all that crud that's built up on it over the winter and make sure it's running properly through the summer as well. So this is a simple one-page back-to-back both sides bulletin that we have that just tells you what you should do as far as running the seasonal maintenance for the spring and fall setup. One of the options we have, which we briefly touched on, is the optional air release. So you can see the air cylinder that's built into that. Very simple, air cylinder, not a lot to it that's built into it. This will run through most of this fairly quickly, but the air cylinder we've already covered. Make sure that you clean the piston shaft correctly. That shows you item 37 or figure 37 shows you where the fitting would be to put the tool oil lubricant in. That's just the bare air cylinder, but there's a 90-degree fitting, which with a push to connect end on it. So it makes it very easy to put that tool oil in there. Fastener maintenance, you can see here the left-hand side graphic is a inboard mount. The right-hand side graphic is an outboard mount. Just make sure you're using the correct parts for the correct job. So these are grade 8, 5/8 minimum diameter bolts and grade C lock nuts for the mounting setup as well. So obviously when you're going to have a vehicle in there to do a PM service, you're going to run through and make sure all the bolts are attached. I know there is a DOT minimum that you are allowed to have a couple missing, certain percentage missing. As a technician, you should see one that's missing and it should be replaced straight away. So when it leaves your shop, it should never have any missing. Upshot cushions. So we have two different versions of it. We have the standard cushion on the left-hand side there, and then we have the ILS, which is the slider style cushion. Both versions are there. As you can see, it's 1 3/8 upshock. Cushion is the measurement for the standard one, and on the slider ILS version, it's 1.5 is the measurement of the hole inside that. And that's measuring the hole, but before you even get to that point, you can actually just check how much slack is in those holes, how much it is. So it's that graphic on the bottom shows you there to just grab a pry bar and lever it up and down. You're checking for free play. You're not trying to compress the rubber bushing. So that doesn't mean you get a 6-foot bar or the biggest guy in the workshop you've got. It's just a little pry bar, pry it up and down and check for free play. A 1/4 inch is the maximum you should be getting from that. If you've got more than that, that's when you take the pins out, pop it up, and then go and check the measurements on the upshot cushions that are in the first 2 graphics on that page. Inspection and adjustment tools. So we recommend the lock adjustment tool on the left-hand side. I know there's a few versions out there, but we recommend this one. Our part number is TF-TLN 5001. We recommend that because it has 3 points of contact across the fifth wheel. So your kingpin is always going to be perfectly square to where it needs to be in the jaws. If you've got that tool on the right-hand side, it sits in the recessed section of the fifth wheel. It can be all sorts of off kilter there and not sitting 90 degrees for the fifth wheel. So you're never going to get a correct adjustment. So we recommend if you've got one of those on the right-hand side, throw it in the scrap bin, get the correct tool for it. And the correct tool will show you how to use it when we do the walk around shortly. And you'll see how easy that is to get in and out. So we mentioned earlier damaged components, and we'll get into improper coupling and shortly after this. So the damaged components here, you can see this is probably our biggest issue with this fifth wheel is maintenance techs not doing their lubrication on the fifth wheel. So this is the cam plate from the bottom of the fifth wheel. It should be lubricated with water resistant lithium based grease, and as you can see there is no grease on that at all. It's rusty, it's dry, it's not slugging properly. That binds up the mechanism and you'll have troubles with the lock and unlock operation of the fifth wheel. So if you do get one like this and you've got driver complaints about how it locks and unlocks, simple check is to spray some PB blaster on it, cycle it a couple of times, and I can tell you in almost all cases that will fix the problem. Once you get some lubrication on there, then you can go through the process of lubricating everything else on it properly. But spray some PB blaster on the cam plate and be amazed how big a percentage that fixes fifth wheels on. So this is another one that we're seeing. This is actually a TT fifth wheel, but same basic mechanism. So you'll notice a few different things here. The secondary lock, the lack of washer on the cam plate bolt. The lubrication isn't great on that one as well. So there's a few little things missing on this particular unit that we looked at. So it was not going to run in tip-top shape as well. So we need to make sure that these things are maintained as necessary. Damaged components. So the picture on the left-hand side there, you can see the bent yoke shaft. It's bent, the top is bent to the right-hand side there. So this would have been someone, a driver has high hooked, so the kingpin has gone completely over the top of the fifth wheel. He's then gone to do his tug test and he's hit the end of the yoke shaft and bent it. The picture on the right-hand side, it's also got a bent yoke shaft, but you can see a little more in detail the bent yoke itself, which is the U-shaped piece. In there, you can see that's bent completely, and you'll never be able to lock and unlock that one correctly. So the good thing about this is because these are a cast fifth wheel, most cases you'll get like these, as long as there's nothing cracked or bent or broken, it's a simple rebuild kit. So it's a much cheaper option than buying a whole new fifth wheel top lane. So have a look at that, make sure that they're the only broken components, nothing in the casting itself is broken, and then it's a simple rebuild kit from there. So for those not familiar with high hooking and what it means, you can see the picture of the truck on the left-hand side. He's high hooked and gone over the top of the fifth wheel to the point where the trailer is up against the back of the cab. And the picture on the right-hand side there shows a little more in depth as to what happens. The kingpin goes over the top and sits on top of the yoke shaft. In some cases, they'll even miss that and then do a tug test and come back in it. So either way, it's going to end up with a bent yoke shaft, and it's going to affect the way it locks and unlocks, and it's going to cause grief. So as a technician, how do you identify whether a fifth wheel has been high hooked? So the picture in the top right, you can see multiple skid marks from a kingpin hitting that fifth wheel over the top. So there's a few witness marks there. The other thing that you'll notice in the picture on the left-hand side there, if you look to the left-hand side of the J-hook, just here, if you can see my arrow here, you see where the arrow points to grease on the front skirt of the fifth wheel. So the grease that you put on the top of the fifth wheel plate ends up, a lot of it ends up over the top as a little lip there. And you can see that's left-hand side, that's perfectly normal, that's where it should be. On the right-hand side there, it looks a little different. You can see there's a white mark in the grease. So the kingpin has gone over the top. Driver's done a tug test against the front of the fifth wheel. He thought he was connected. He's gone to take off. He's driven around a corner. In this case, it was probably a right-hand corner. And the kingpin has then wiped itself around the left-hand side of the fifth wheel and come off and he's dropped the trailer. So there's a couple of witness marks you can see there as a tech to see what has happened. Okay, so if you ever get a drop trailer, that would be one of the first things we look for. Is there a white mark across the grease in the front skirt of the fifth wheel? And if there is, you high hooked and you did your tug test against the front of the fifth wheel, not with the kingpin in the jaws. Remember, the last step in any fifth wheel connection procedure, doesn't matter whether it's us or a competitor or TMC or any of those, the last step in any procedure is the driver should do a visual check to make sure the kingpin is securely locked in the jaws of the fifth wheel. Okay, if the driver had have done that, he would have realized that the kingpin was not in the jaws at all in this case. All right, just some helpful bulletins. There's another one here. We have rebuild versus replace criteria. There's a few more bits and pieces in here. So we go through a simple yes/no checklist for you to check what needs to be rebuilt versus replaced. If anything is too bad, then you know what you've got, whether you can rebuild or replace the fifth wheel. So I'll scoot through to the next couple of pictures because I'll show you some of what you can look for. So in this case, one of the things that we always ask is clean, lubricate, and adjust. Before you have any problems and call us, clean, lubricate, and adjust. And you can see with this fifth wheel, it may have been scraped off, but it's not clean. You can't see if there's any cracks or any damage underneath that. You are going to get, little bit marks from, the occasional high hook and things like that, but you're not going to be able to inspect this properly unless you clean it off thoroughly. So we recommend cleaning these off on a regular interval, 6 months, 60,000 miles. This particular fifth wheel, same one. You'll notice when they sent it back, they bolted the mechanism to a pallet. What does that mean? Well, that means that they had a problem with the fifth wheel itself, but they didn't look at the tag, which was one of the very first slides. We told you, look at the tag and it will tell you whether it's an FW number or an XA number. All they needed to do was replace the top plate itself, but they took the whole base plate and everything off. So they spent a lot more money to replace this than they would have needed to in the first place. This is another one, just shows another dry cam plate. This one's even drier than the last one. You can see they lubricated the top plate really well, but the mechanism itself underneath was bone dry, was never touched. And we see this on a regular basis. We lubricated the fifth wheel on the top plate, yes, but the jaws weren't lubricated. The cam plate wasn't lubricated. All the parts that make the moving parts that make everything work were not lubricated as needed. All you did was put a pound of grease on the top of it and pull it good. That's not what is required. You need to make sure the mechanism is lubricated correctly as well. So if you do get to that point and you do need to rebuild or repair this, there is a manual for that as well. All of these are available on our website, or you can scan QR code on the ramp and get the POD Plus, and they'll be available on there for you to look at as well. But there's a full manual on how to rebuild these as well. All right, so center loading. you can see around the jaw pins here, you'll see a round circular mark, which is directly related to the shape of a kingpin. So this particular one here, there is a recessed section in this fifth wheel down here. So all of these pins actually sit lower than the load bearing part of this fifth wheel across here. So that should never see any contact at all. So in this case, something is not straight, whether it's the upper coupler or the fifth wheel. So you've got the vehicle in the workshop there. The very simple task is go and grab a straight edge and put it across the fifth wheel and see if the fifth wheel is straight. So very, very, very rarely do we see a bent fifth wheel. We test them for rollovers and all sorts of things, and I can tell you they're pretty tolerant of this sort of stuff. So when you find that the fifth wheel is straight from the straight edge, then go and find the last trailer it's connected to. I'll almost guarantee you the upper coupler is bent. But this is what it will look like in real life. You'll have a nice air gap between the fifth wheel and the upper coupler plate or bolster plate. And in this case, we've gone and put our Kingpin gauge in there, otherwise affectionately known as the blue license plate gauge. We'll show you that shortly as well. And this is what you need to check. So put a straight edge across that upper coupler and you'll see whether it's bowed up or bowed down. There's two different measurements. If it's bowed up, you've got 0.06. And then if you bow down, which is the most common one, you'll see you've got 1/4 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch, depending on how far out from the kingpin you are, whether it's 10 or 19 inches. I will say, don't assume that it's a brand new trailer and the upper coupler is straight. I have seen this in the past with almost brand new trailers where the upper coupler is bent. So don't say, hey, it's a new trailer company, it must be the fifth wheel, and I can't find anything. Just go and check both just to make sure you're 100% correct and see where the root cause of the problem actually is. So this is the blue license plate gauge that we have. This is measuring the kingpin height itself. So you're using the outside measurements. This license plate gauge actually works for both 2-inch and 3.5-inch kingpins. So you use opposing ends of the gauge there. So the right hand side of it is all the 2-inch part. So you'll see here, they put it in the left hand side picture up against the upper coupler into the kingpin there, and you see that's the correct height. The picture on the right hand side, they've got a low lube slick plate, one of those aftermarket plates put on it. And what that's done is that's measured, that's spaced out the kingpin, so it's the wrong height. So you'll notice that gauge doesn't slot in there, which means that gauge is built on the SAE measurements for where the jaws are going to be in the fifth wheel itself. So you'll notice it's actually on the left hand side there. It does a SAE J700, which is the measurements for the fifth wheel and kingpin height. So they all line up correctly. So aftermarket slick plates we don't recommend. If you do want a slick plate, you can get them built into the trailer, and the kingpin height will be adjusted accordingly. If you want them built into the fifth wheel, we actually have them built into the fifth wheel. We mentioned at the start the FW35, same basic fifth wheel as this mechanism here, but it has the low loop plates built in. So low loop plates aren't a problem, but it needs to adhere to the SAE height measurements of SAE J10. Otherwise, everything doesn't line up correctly and you have problems from there. All right, kingpin measurement. So this, again, we're using the license plate gauge. This is we're now measuring the diameter of the kingpin itself. So you'll see there's a round slot in the middle. To the left-hand side, it's for the 3.5-inch kingpins. To the right-hand side is for the 2-inch kingpins. And you'll notice the round section in the middle is where you slot the kingpin in. And then you have two separate go-no-go gauges. So you've got the 2-inch neck, which is the version on the left-hand side that we're checking there, and literally just grab that and spin it around 360 degrees. You don't have to pull on it hard. It's only a plastic gauge, but you're just checking if it falls in with nothing more than a finger inside, spinning it around, then that kingpin is the one. You can also check the shoulder as well. which is, as you can see there, in the nice pretty writing on there, it's 2.88 inches on the shoulder as well. And that is also a no-go gauge on that as well. So. Adjustment procedure. So this is one thing we really like with this fifth wheel. It's not a graduated adjustment like most other fifth wheels. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4 notches. This one is a threaded rod, which means it's infinitely adjustable. You can adjust this, as often as you like. You don't need to do it on a regular basis, other than the standard intervals we mentioned earlier, but it's a threaded rod, so you can adjust it very, very finitely as much as you need to. So the adjustment procedure on this is very simple. You back off the adjustment nut a nominal amount. We recommend 5 to 6 turns, and then cycle the lock adjustment tool a couple of times from there. What that does is, by backing the adjustment nut off, it allows the yoke to come down just a little bit further than it would normally go. And it's essentially you're trying to grab hold of, trying to wedge the yoke down and grab the jaws onto the Kingpin as tight as it can possibly be. The reason you cycle it a couple of times is that buildup of grease and road grime that's around the jaws, around the yoke tips, just builds up. So you cycle it a couple of times just to push all that gunk out of the way. That way you know you've got a correct ground zero for your adjustment. Then while it's coupled up, tighten the adjustment nut back up again, and do it until it's snug. That rubber grommet should be really hard to turn. It shouldn't be completely free, shouldn't be unable to be turned somewhere in the middle, but try and make it hard to turn. Then you give that adjustment nut one additional turn clockwise. What that does is it just brings the yoke tip back just a fraction and opens up the jaws around the Kingpin just that little bit. So you've got enough running clearance. You're not going to wear the Kingpin excessively. You're not going to have turning issues or any wear issues, but it's not enough running clearance where you're going to have the Kingpin chucking backwards and forwards and drivers complaining that it needs adjustment. So, and then the last step in it is to go through and cycle it a couple of times and just check, verify that the adjustment is correct. Make sure there was no build-up grease left in there. So check it again, make sure that rubber grommet is still tight. From there, you know it's correct. If you've got one that hasn't been adjusted in years, I have seen them where there's so much grease and gunk built up at the fifth wheel that it took three turns, 3 adjustment procedures to actually get it to take, just before we got all that grease and gunk out of it. So last step is verify proper adjustment, make sure it's correct. All right, another option that we have is the ELI-te, so the electronic lock indicator. This is the 2nd generation, which is the technology enhanced version. So what this is a electronic device that mounts underneath the fifth wheel. It has a couple of sensors in it that registers whether you have a correct couple or not. Okay, you'll see here, you can see hopefully you can see my mouse. Next to the cam plate, there's an orange dot. That's a sensor that recognizes the cam plate coming across. That's one of the 2 sensors that we have. The other one is to the left of the jaws. That's disappeared. There it is. Just here, this sensor here. We don't recognize the Kingpin coming in straight off because it's a metal Kingpin running on metal jaws. You can get some swarp. So what we do is we have a little, what we call the flag here. It hits the Kingpin, rotates this panel up against the sensor, and that way there's no swarp, so you don't get any false positives, false negatives, whatever. So what happens with this in real life? If one of those 2 sensors isn't correct, the red lights start flashing. So there's 2 red lights built up the front of this fifth wheel. I can tell you these are bright enough to see in daylight very clearly. At night, they are horrendously bright. You can't miss these things. So they will cycle for a couple of minutes, so you know that it's an incorrect couple. Even if you miss it and you're driving out the gate, they'll probably still be cycling, and someone will be able to flag you down and say, hey, stop. If you do get a correct couple, we don't have green lights because green means go. We have white lights because the last step in any procedure, as we've already mentioned, is the driver should be doing a visual inspection. So we have a series of white lights that shine up into the jaw mechanism so the driver can get under there and have a look to make sure the kingpin is correctly encapsulated by the jaws. Okay, so that way the driver is doing their visual inspection. Okay, so this is not a replacement for a driver procedure. It's a safeguard in case people aren't doing the right thing. Let's just try and help and assist them before they even get out of the cabin. They can see flashing red lights. Oh, something's wrong. I need to go and try again, fix what I did wrong. Okay, so as you can see on the left-hand side there, you can see the white lights shining into the jaws there. And then on the right-hand side, that's a daytime photo of those red lights, and they will be flashing. We've taken a picture there of it while it's on, but it's flashing. So you can see them during the daylight. At night, they are very, very bright. There is some more information here on system components here, but fitting up of this is very simple. It's literally a 4-wire system. There's a ground wire, which is the brown wire, a white wire, which is the power input. It's an ignition switched power input. And then you have the correct and incorrect coupling lights, which is the blue and the black wire from there. If you choose not to use them, you can just tie those over and make sure they're not connected to anything. But very simple system. Essentially, you only need 2 wires to connect it to make sure that it works correctly. There is a complete manual on the ELI-te should you have issues. That's the link and the manual number down there. Again, if you have the presentation, you click on that, or you can just type in that manual number into our website, or just type in ELI-te into our website into the search engine in there, and it will find it for you. This is the operation. We'll skip through some of this. This will be here on the presentation if you want to read more in depth. The manual does actually come with a troubleshooting guide, which will help you with a lot of the issues built into it that you may come across, whether it's cables corroded, something pulled out, something not working correctly, a sensor misadjusted, something like that. It will cover what the problem is, the cause, and the solution for you to go through. And there's also a troubleshooting flow chart for you to work through. But as you can see, the components in that orange box there, it's pretty simplistic. There's not a lot to deal with. All right. One of the big things that we do come across with the lock indicator is the misadjusted sensor. So they do have to be a set distance away. So there's a lock nut on there for you just to get that correct. So just make sure they are adjusted correctly as per that graphic. Thread locker, just make sure the torques are correct, 22 foot-pounds. Button. All right, correct coupling. So this one's more for the drivers. Here. Visual inspection. We mentioned the lock adjustment nut, or the yoke adjustment nut in the front of the fifth wheel. There's a drivers use as a visual inspection guide. So figure 3 there, you can see that is in the locked position. So the nut is up against the washer and the rubber grommet up against the fifth wheel housing, the front skirt there. So that we know is a locked situation. If it is unlocked, there'll be a big air gap between the nut and the front skirt of the fifth wheel, and the washer and the rubber grommet will be floating somewhere in that gap there. So make sure that when the drivers do a correct coupling, that's one of the things that they look for. Figure 4, just make sure that there's no gaps between the fifth wheel and the upper coupler itself. Okay, so make sure that that way you're checking for things like your aftermarket lube plates, that they haven't high heated. You haven't got Kingpin sitting on top of the jaws. You know what, we've seen some pretty weird and wacky things over the years. So just make sure that there's no gaps there. The other thing is figure 5. The driver, as we've said repeatedly, the driver has to do a visual inspection. So that's what the jaws should look like wrapped around the Kingpin. Should the jaws hit each other? No. There should be 1/4 of an inch or less gap between the jaws. Okay, so just getting to visually inspect that. Once they get used to doing it, it'll become like second nature. Tools available. We have a vast array of tools available, I should say. So when we do the walk around, you'll see that rebuild stand we have there on the left-hand side. That's basically what we have in the room here with the fifth wheel on it. If you're rebuilding, you'll use the TF0237, the 2-inch plug, just to keep the jaws in place. And then we've got the lock tester, TF-5001. That also works on our other fifth wheels, which have some slightly different procedures, whether it's the 35TT to check the jaw wear, whether it's the FWAL or 17, that works for all of our fifth wheels. And then we have the Kingpin wear gauge, which we affectionately call the Kingpin wear gauge. Is affectionately called the blue license plate gauge because it looks like a license plate cover. TF0110. So available resources. As I mentioned, we have our main website, which is SAF-HOLLAND.US. If you do hit .com, it just takes you to the global website, and you hit US and English language, and you're back to .US anyway. So a couple of extra steps. So it's no biggie if you hit .com. We do have some other fun stuff. So we know that we have a pretty broad product range here in our range, whether it's fifth wheels, landing gear, kingpins, pintle hooks, axles, suspensions, disc brake, drum brakes. Now with the inclusion of HOLLAND into the family, there's going to be even more. So trying to find some information can be a little bit cumbersome through our website. I recommend using the search function. That'll help you out a lot. But we have pared down, we have what we call a microsite. So we have a fifth wheel microsite, which is HOLLANDfifthwheels.com, and that will cover just the information on fifth wheels. It's not 100% of everything, but it's like the greatest hits, and it's so much more easily accessible from there. As part of that, there's a part within that site called the ELI-te microsite, which will cover the lock indicator. And then we have here the link to VOD, which is parts on demand. That's the homepage link, but if you scan the QR code on the ID tag, that will get you to the exact page for the fifth wheel you're working on. The manuals mentioned through this, we have the owner's manual, seasonal preventative maintenance, rebuild manual, ELI-te manual, they are all in there as well. If you want some videos to watch, we have a YouTube channel, which is fairly easily found. That's the link on the bottom there, but you can simply search for SAF-HOLLAND and it will come up. We have, for drivers, we have a coupling and uncoupling video, so that's good to add to your driver training regime if you have one of those within your company. And then we have the rebuild and adjustment video as well within that. The rebuild video is at the start, and then right at the very end is the adjustment. There is an adjustment video on its own as well, should you need it, but you'll be able to find that as well. And there is also a Kingpin inspection procedure video that we have as well. So we mentioned the microsite. This is what it looks like. As soon as you get onto the homepage, it shows you the varying models of fifth wheels, and you can literally click on the one that you have and all the information will come up from there. So you can visually identify just by looking at the fifth wheel as visual differences as to what they look like. You see the 17's a different shape. The AL's obviously very different because it's aluminum, so that's easy to spot. And then you've got the bigger ones like the FW70, 100, 165s, and those severe duty ones. And then you've got mounting options there as well. So once you get into your correct fifth wheel, you'll be able to look at things like service videos. So these are great for those who work on night shift as well. And we'll be able to go through, you'll be able to go through those at night and look at those yourself. So these are the direct links to the YouTube videos. So even if you want to, you can hit watch on YouTube and save your own favorites, which will come in handy as well. But you'll see there's the rebuild procedure, the adjustment procedure, coupling and uncoupling, and slider operation as well. So there's a few very handy videos for whether you're a tech, a driver, a safety manager, whatever. There's some good stuff in there for you. So a quick summary: clean, lubricate, and adjust. So make sure you clean the top plate thoroughly. Lubricate, not just the top of the fifth wheel itself. Make sure you lubricate the lock mechanism as well. All the moving components underneath, that's what makes the magic happen. So if you don't lubricate that, you're probably going to end up calling us saying, well, hey, why doesn't this work? The first thing we're going to say, clean, lubricate, and adjust. Does it still not work? Okay, what's happening from there? So, and then your adjustment, we covered that before, and we'll go through shortly to do the walk around on the fifth wheel we have in the room here, and then just go through, if there is still issues, go through the rebuild versus replace criteria checklist that we showed you. And if something does happen from there, you can always contact us. So that's me on the top left there, Tony Ryan, I'm the technical services manager. I have 3 field service guys running around the country for me. Kyle Hinton does the central part of the country. Ben Dartes is based on the West Coast, and Ronnie Hines does the East Coast. And as mentioned in the intro, we also have Dan Cohn here. He's one of our business development managers that we have here as well. So he does some of our national accounts. All right, so quick questions. What is one of the most common causes of a fifth wheel not functioning correctly? The lack of lubrication, and in particular on the cam plate. The vast majority of issues I get calls on, it's not working correctly. Okay, yep, it's all dry and rusty on there. Spray some PB blaster on it. Cycle it 2 or 3 times. Now, does it work correctly now? Yep. There you go. That's all you need to do. Very simple. That's like we say, clean, lubricate, adjust. Question 2, can the yoke shaft adjustment nut and the handle be used as a visual indicator that the wheel is locked? Yes, absolutely. The handle's a little bit trickier to notice, but the adjustment nut hanging off the front of the fifth wheel is what drivers use all the time. So a lot of other fifth wheels don't have something like that as a visual indicator. It makes life so much easier for the drivers as well. What's the final step in any coupling procedure? For the driver to visually inspect that the jaws are locked into, the kingpin is locked into the jaws, sorry. Can I adjust my fifth wheel while attached to a trailer? That's a big no, because almost every kingpin out there is worn to some degree, and you've just gone and adjusted your fifth wheel to that worn kingpin on that trailer. So if you go and connect to a trailer with a kingpin that's brand new or not as worn, you're going to have coupling issues with that. So we do not recommend that you adjust it to a trailer. Recommend you adjust it to the lock tester, which is it's not a used kingpin, it just sits on a tool, so it's always the correct measurement. And the last question is, are aftermarket lube plates or otherwise known slip plates a viable option? The aftermarket ones, no, because it changes the kingpin height, whether it's attaching them to the upper coupler or the bolster plate, or whether they're attached to the fifth wheel itself. No, because you're adjusting that SAE measurement, which means that the kingpin is not going to marry up to the jaws to the correct height. So you need to make sure that you're not putting something aftermarket in there. If it's a like for like, if the trailer was built with one, go ahead and replace it. Because if you don't, and you pull it off, then it's going to do the opposite. It's going to drop the, it's going to extend the kingpin too long. And same with the fifth wheel. If you've got lube plates built in the fifth wheel, sure, go and replace them. They're built with that SAE measurement in mind. So, all right. So that's the end of the presentation. What we're going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to do a little bit of a walk around here. Okay. So I will grab the camera, and Dan's going to be our model extraordinaire, and he's going to run through the fifth wheel itself. So,
okay, thanks, Tony. So we just want to start with some of the major components of the lock. So everything down here is the moving parts. Some of the key components: secondary lock. So this is the secondary lock that comes in behind the yoke that keeps it locked up going down the road. If you get a fifth wheel that will not unlock, this is probably the first place we want to check. Make sure that this pin is still installed, because if it's not, the cam is not going to be able to move it out of the way. If it's missing, you're going to need to get in here with a J hook or something, pull it out of the way so you can pull the handle and unlock the fifth wheel. The other thing, cam plate, you notice it's loose. We want it that way. We don't want it tight. The measurement here, 60 to 120 thousandths between the washer and the plate. You want something loose here, okay? If this bolt is loose, Do not just tighten it up and move on. This bolt cuts its own threads into the yoke shaft, okay? So if it's loose, it means that the thing is backed out, probably pulled the threads out. So just don't go get a new bolt, put it in there and think it's going to solve it, because it's going to cut some different threads and it'll probably pull right out. So if you're replacing the bolt, replace the yoke shaft. Those things go together. There is no torque specification on this bolt. We don't put any torque specification on it. You run it down until it bottoms out in the hole, cutting its own threads. You'll know when to stop. There'll be a definite stop there. Don't over tighten it. You'll strip the threads out and have to start all over again. G, where we need the oil, this right here is your cam pivot point. There's a roller on the back side of here. So this is where it gets oil. Everything else, water resistant, lithium based grease. Okay. Tony mentioned earlier, visual inspection. Should the jaws be touching each other? No, it's a 1/4 inch or less with the jaws against the Kingpin. That covers the top side, the bottom side.
We got.
The back in action here.
So quickly, just reiterate what we were talking about then, is this is the jaws. This is what we were talking about earlier. This is what a driver would see normally. Make sure those jaws are correct all the way around that Kingpin, less than 1/4 of an inch gap between the jaws. Perfect. That's what you're looking for. And the other thing, while I am doing my little walk around, there's the ID tag. And the light away, so you don't get as much of a reflection, but there is the ID tag there that you can see with the QR code. And one thing I will point out is it's actually a 2-part tag. It's the tag itself, and then there is a clear plastic sleeve over the top. So this little pull tab across the top here, if you get one that's been painted through the OEM and you can't see a tag on it, look for that pull tab. You'll be able to pull that off, and that just stops it from being painted over the top of.
Okay, I think with that, we'll start the adjustment procedure. As Tony mentioned, HOLLAND 5001, the only thing that we recommend for making a proper adjustment. We're going to start, I always like starting cycling the wheel a few times. Doing is seating that yoke down in there, move the tool out of the way. Grab our wrench, 1 1/8" socket, or you can use regular wrench, box end, and we're going to back this nut off 5 to 6 turns. You just want to get this thing loose so that the rubber grommet and washer spin. Okay. Next thing, we're going to cycle the 5th wheel again, making sure that that yoke is all the way down. All right, check, make sure you can turn that. Now we're starting from ground zero. Yokes are all the way down. Jaws are as tight as they can get around that Kingpin. Now we're going to start our adjustment.
One thing, Dan, if you do get to that point where you've backed it off a certain amount of turns and that rubber grommet is still tight, back it off further.
Keep going. All right, so start adjusting this down until you can just barely turn that rubber grommet. And it should be very hard to turn when you get it down there. Going. All right, I can just barely turn that. From here, this is where we're going to introduce the one additional turn. So all this is doing is pulling the yoke tips back a little bit, giving us a little bit of clearance. One time around, that's it. You should not be able to turn that rubber grommet. Last step, We're gonna verify that we got a proper adjustment. Cycle it 2-3 times, move it out of the way. Can I turn that? Nope, I can't turn it. We've got a proper adjustment. If you can still turn this rubber grommet, start your adjustment procedure over again and get it down to a point where you cannot turn it.
All right.
And that is it. You can take these-
Just show the regular couple position as well. So that's gone from the lock to Dan pulled the handle there. That's the unlock position. And then you'll notice as the Kingpin comes out through there, if you watch the handle, the head went to the ready to couple position. So what you're looking for is for that handle just to bobble. It'll go in and down just a section. This is an old training fifth wheel that we use for this particular application. But that's what you're looking for, is for that handle just to bobble in and down a little bit, and you know it's gone to the ready to couple position. If you were to have an issue where it won't, you can lock and unlock it, but it won't go back to the ready to couple position, then suddenly you won't be able to relock it. One of the things that you will see from that particular point, or one of the root causes of this, and I'll climb under as best I can here. Okay, so on that handle, you can see the handle there. Yep, the end of the spring, there's a little cotter pin that Dan's got his hands on. Okay, that cotter pin, if that ever comes out for any reason, that spring doesn't have any back pressure on the handle anymore, and it won't bobble the cam plate, and it won't go in the ready to couple position. So we see that from time to time as well. So that's another one of those little tricks of the trade that we see from time to time. If you can't get it in the ready to couple position, then just fix that as well. All right. So we'll go back, put the camera back down. Couple of things we will mention, Dan. You want to just run through that? That's the air cylinder.
All right, air cylinder, we talked about if it's equipped with an air cylinder, FW35 TT always has an air cylinder on it. But this is our most heavily spec'd option on over-the-road vehicles as well. So you're going to activate it, get the cylinder out, the shaft out, and just clean it off with a regular shop cloth. Do not use emery cloth or steel wool, anything that's going to score this thing up. And then putting your 2 to 4 drops of tool oil either in the end of the cylinder or in the line itself. We don't care. Hook it up, cycle it a few times. There is an O-ring in here, an O-ring seal. We want that lubed up so it slides back and forth nice and easy.
Just want to quickly, just while we've got a minute, just show the license plate gauge. You want to flip the tool over and just show them how to use use it on the Kingpin?
Yep.
I'll stop trying to help and concentrate on being a camera person.
So, tool pin gauge, Kingpin gauge. You're gonna put it up here, check the shoulder first, rotate it all the way around 360 degrees. If it can slide in there, that thing is worn. Same thing with the neck. Around the neck, 360 degrees. It's a no-go-go gauge, a no-go gauge. So if it slides in there, it means that it's worn beyond its acceptable point. Time to replace the Kingpin. Likewise, oops, we're going to check the height. There. Measure the height of the Kingpin. You can see that this one makes it. If it doesn't fit in there, there's a different height. This Kingpin is not adjusted correctly. And then the last one, once it's coupled, we want to check to make sure that this thing cannot go underneath between your upper coupler and the slide plate. Okay.
And remember, folks, we did mention earlier with when you're putting a straight edge across the fifth wheel here, that this little section here is recessed. So if you do have that wear mark in here from improper center loading, this section here is recessed in here. So this is the weight bearing section across here. So you can see there, it shows it beautifully, Dan. Thank you.
Got a recess in there. Yeah, if this is all shiny, you got something wrong.
Yep, correct. So, and we mentioned before, we showed the lock visual indicator for the drivers. As you can see, this is simply unlocked. There's no kingpin in there. And this is what we mentioned. There's a big, nice gap. Those rubber grommets and washers are just floating there. That is obviously not coupled correctly. And then that's what it looks like coupled correctly. So very simple. All right. We'll wrap it up from there. I'll put the camera back. Bear with me a second, folks. So that's pretty much everything we've got. I will just briefly share the screen again, the presentation again, so you have it. Get it to go back a little bit. I was just going to go back to this screen here. So one last wrap up we'll give you before we go is if you do have problems, you can always contact us. That's me in the top left corner, Tony Ryan. We've got Kyle, Ben and Ronnie, and we've got Dan here as one of our business development managers that we have that help out with customer and their sales. So from a service point of view, it's the top four, and then we have the sales guys and Dan underneath that. So if you have any issues, give us a call. We'll wrap this up. We tend on putting this video on our website, so you'll be able to watch this at your leisure. So it'll be on our website and on YouTube, I believe. So if there's any issues, give us a call. Other than that, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.